Wealth preservation. So we've talked about asset protection, which is protecting something from somebody just taking it away from you. Wealth preservation is a little bit more subtle than that. It's about how you project your wealth forward into future generations. So this is my favourite. I can always win a job out of this one. Are you concerned that your spouse will remarry? This is for sort of the middle-aged and younger people. And your assets will go to the new bloke or his kids. Now, the good thing about this, I have put it as the new bloke, assuming that the guy's died, but both sides of a couple will feel equally as passionate about this because they all think that they're going to be the person who dies first. So it works both ways. But that's a massive issue. The amount of people that I've seen where this has destroyed pretty much all the relationships within a family is just uncanny, because there is only one certainty in life, and that's your repartner. Death and taxes, they come second. Everybody does, in one form or another, and it always creates issues unless you plan for it. Do you want to make sure that your kids don't end up spending their inheritance on expensive drugs? So instead of saying you need to update your will, just say, what's the chance of your 18-year-old with the $2 million worth of life insurance, how long do you reckon he's going to last until he's killed himself on an overdose? That's the sort of question, the issue, that's going to elicit an emotional response. It's not how do we protect these assets and do all this fancy stuff and capital preservation trusts and all this sort of thing. Clients don't care. This is what they care about, and this is how you raise these issues. Do you want your spouse to preserve some assets for the kids? So once again, there's certain types of clients this is an issue for. Business, farmers, that sort of stuff. Do you want your children to preserve things for grandchildren? So you're starting to get up to the high net worth people and these particular types of clients. These issues are relevant to them. If you raise these issues with your clients, they will have a response, and it will be a meaningful response. Do you want to fund your grandchildren's education pre-tax? People say, oh, there's fantastic tax benefits associated with testamentary trusts. That sentence means nothing, in my view. What does mean something to somebody is, wow, my kids can afford to send my kids to a good school, and the government's going to help support that. That's the issue that people want solved. They don't want tax benefits, CGT, blah, blah, blah. They're not interested. They don't understand it. It has no context for them. It's not a key issue for them. And there you go, put it up there anyway. So, do you want to pay tax, CGT, super, so. But that one there, if I was in a meeting, I'd raise that issue by saying, you've got 2 investment properties and 2 kids. Your current will is going to give half of each investment property to each of your kids. What do you reckon the chances are those kids are going to have an argument about how they're going to manage those 2 properties if they each have half of those investment properties? Why don't we put in there in your will the ability for them to make a choice when you die, for one of them to take A and one of them to take B? The client goes, well, they can't do that anyway. So, well, they can do that, but if you don't put the right provision, which is a 2-liner in the will, they'll pay CGT and stamp duty on half of both properties at the time of your death. What's that going to cost them? Oh, okay, right, yeah, okay. So all to the kids as this concept, or first to the spouse, all to the kids, is not enough when you raise this key issue. You look at the assets they've got and you say, do we want the ability to make adjustments in a tax effective way? And then for the more high net worth individuals, the farming families, the significant family businesses, they want their estate, they want to leave a legacy, and they want it to go into future generations. And how are you going to achieve that? Is that relevant to them? How long do they want that to happen? There's a lot of issues around that which can generate some great discussions. Once again, we use some pictures. That's the repartnering problem. That's a way to get around it. This is the concept of family wills. So I've got the will, don't need another will, and say, okay, well, you know, your spouse owns your house. You don't own it. You don't have any interest in that house. You have all the superannuation. Spouse has no superannuation. You have a family trust. You have all these different things. And you've said you want it all to go to the surviving spouse, and then you want it to go to the children. Well, a will won't do that because it won't capture all those other assets. So we use things I loosely refer to as a family will, which is a series of documents which will actually achieve the outcome that all the assets will actually move around as they need to in accordance with those objectives that you're writing down. That's the tax benefit thing. We can show them that. We can talk about not blowing up the kids by spreading out when they're going to get the assets over time. So it might seem like I'm sort of raising a lot of issues, and when's this going to end? There are a limited number of them, and it does take a little bit of time to appreciate what those issues are and have the confidence to talk about them. But it's certainly a lot easier than becoming a tax expert, super expert, risk insurance expert, whatever, to actually solve all of these problems. So estate administration is this next category of issues that we look at. Rather talk about, client's not going to get buy-in when you talk about all your structures and blah, blah, blah. This is what they're thinking. They think, my affairs are in a mess. I don't understand what I've got. How does your self-managed super fund work? Who's the trustees who's the directors of the trustee? Who owns the shares? No idea. So tapping into that feeling, which is probably going to be there, that your affairs are in a mess, is going to get them thinking, oh my God, and I've got to get them fixed up before Christmas. And you've got a job. Do you want to give your spouse and or children or beneficiaries complete control over your estate if something happened to you, either in coma or death? Or not? Do you want to have someone share control? So we're talking about administering your estate, and what you find is there's this sort of presumption that a spouse or children want to be involved in administering assets is quite often wrong. Quite often people just don't want to be bothered with it. So that's another job for you. So how you do that, there's a whole lot of things that you can do legally and whatever, but the concept, just asking the client the question, or asking their spouse or whatever it is, do you want to be fully in control and take responsibility of this mess that I've created for your family over the last 20 years? I'm not saying that obviously, but or do we want to talk about other ways where we can introduce other people and other techniques to ensure that your estate is administered in a way that it has a level of comfort and protection for people? Yes, yeah, that sounds good, And this follows on. Do they have the expertise or the interest? Usually it's neither. So the person who's built up the wealth, built up the business, is running the farm, they're passionate about it, but usually everybody else in the family is turned off by that stage. Do you want to put in place a mechanism such that your children and grandchildren can gradually come into control and gradually come into the process of administering your family's wealth? Do you want to have mentors in place for them? Yes. Medium and high wealth people, they love that. Their biggest concern is who's going to help their children? Who's going to work with them in the next 50 years to make all the hard work that they've done building up that wealth or that business actually do what they did it for, what they sacrificed their time for, their family and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So this transition of control and transition of involvement and mentors and advisors and a caring environment is something that a lot of people want, and they'll pay for it. And it's great work, it's interesting work. Is it important that everybody's treated fairly? Rather than you need this adjustment provision and we need to worry about tax and what about specific gift versus residual gift, that's not how the client sees it. The client sees it as, do you want to treat everybody fairly? Yep. How much of a concern that is? Well, if someone gets $100 more than the other person, they're going to fight. Okay, well then we need to think about adjustments and making sure this thing's fair. Once again, you don't have to know how to make it fair, but you need to know that's a burning issue for a particular client. And do you have a child with a disability that might not be able to look after themselves? That's a diagram I use to scare people in relation to estate administration, and it just goes through the various stages of which people don't really understand necessarily, particularly obviously clients, as to how an estate is administered. And this is a good one in relation to fairness. So what happens if one of the kids who might be older, might be involved in the self-managed super fund as a director, somehow all the assets from the super fund go out to child B, and then the will says, I split my estate equally between my two kids. So the will's only going to operate with what's in personal estate. We've got superannuation going to one but not the other. So we've got an unfair result which can be dealt with quite simply through the right documentation. So we're just illustrating to the client, these are the things that could go wrong that could frustrate your objective. Once we understand your concerns and objectives, these are the issues that might go wrong. And now we need to find somebody to help us. And I'll project manage that process for you and make sure it all happens. And I'll deliver it for a price from competent people that I already know and I've already done due diligence on. And I'll deliver to you that outcome at that price. Who else is going to be able to say that to them? Not many people. So business interests. How dependent is your business on you? These are key issues that business people worry about. Who'll look after your business once you're gone? Will your spouse understand and be able to deal with your business and the investment that your business represents? Often it's the biggest asset within the family. This one's sort of, once again, in my top four. Are you concerned that your business partner will try and rip your spouse off when you die because they're desperate for the money? And then everybody thinks that they're going to be the one who survives. They think that's really funny until you say, well, do you want to work for your partner's spouse because she won't sell or he won't sell? So once again, both sides of the equation, they're the two issues that will get buy-in in relation to business succession. I mean, you probably all know that, people who do it with risk insurance. But they're the key issues. You don't have to know what's in the buy-sell agreement to make that happen, but you need to be able to tell somebody these are issues and we want them solved. And finally, the last category of issues is social contribution. I think there's we're seeing a growing interest, if you like, in concept of social contribution. I use that social contribution rather than charitable gifting because I see social contribution as something wider. And it can sometimes start at home, for example, educating their grandchildren. Thinking about something more than just giving people money, giving someone an outcome. So do you want to empower your children to make a difference in the community? That's rather than do you want to give any gifts to charity? No. They spend it all on administration fees. That's the reaction you get. But if you say, do you want to empower your children to make a difference if you've got some money? Rather than give it all to them, do they need all that money? What about you put it aside and you get the 3 kids around and they can work out who they're going to give that money to over the next 15 years after you're dead? Does that interest you? Yeah, that sounds interesting. That's a great project to be involved in as an advisor. I think this is perhaps even more important. Do you want to set an example to your children about the way you think people should operate in the community by setting up a charitable fund, giving money, involving them in that process? That's a legacy that you're leaving in relation to your children about the way you see life. Do you want to help your old school out? Had a couple of instances recently where people have set up scholarship funds. Do you have a passion that you want to advance? Art, something like that. So you can see, we're not saying do you want to help out a charity? And do you have a concern or a problem that you want to solve? If people are dying because of some sickness, often that changes the way they view social contributions and giving. So rather than just tick the box, do you want to give anything to charity? And everybody, 9 out of 10, probably 99 out of 100 say no. If you ask these questions, you might get a different response. And if you ask these questions and you get a different response, you've got a great project to be involved in. Just talk about segmenting the clients.